An aircraft carrier is often called a city at sea, but the moment it's ordered to move, it transforms into a different entity entirely, a weapon of national will. Its speed measured not in miles per hour, but by how quickly it can shift from a steel monolith at the pier into a 100,000-ton war machine, slicing through the ocean. This transformation from idle readiness to full-speed transit has been refined over decades of practice, discipline, and engineering designed to eliminate wasted minutes. Once you understand the process, you see it not as just sailing, but as one of the most impressive feats in modern military mobility. The raw physics are staggering. Nuclear propulsion enables carriers like the Nimitz and Gerald R. Ford classes to sustain speeds of over 30 knots for months without needing to refuel. This means the ship's limitation isn't fuel, it's orders. The instant the command is given, every minute between the pier and the open ocean is stripped down to the essentials. The Fleet Response Plan ensures that at any given moment, there are crews who can have their carrier underway in under a day, with escorts aligning in a synchronized ballet. To an untrained observer, a departure may look like a slow push-off, but behind the railings, hundreds of crew members are executing a tightly scripted sequence. Mooring lines are hauled in, tugs push the hull clear, and below deck, engineers are already bringing the reactors to full output. The ship doesn't wait until it's in blue water to prepare for combat. Every checklist anticipates it from the moment the engines turn over, and a deployment can be compressed into a race against unfolding events. Nuclear reactors respond quickly to demand, eliminating the need to heat boilers for hours. So once the hull is free, acceleration to cruising speed is rapid. A carrier strike group is more than just the carrier. It includes cruisers, destroyers, and sometimes supply ships, all moving as a single unit. Coordination at speed requires pre-planned rendezvous points. During a rapid deployment, destroyers already at sea can meet the carrier en route, eliminating delays. The Fleet Response Plan's surge capacity allows for multiple strike groups to be underway almost immediately if a crisis demands it. The stakes of this speed are not abstract. In a regional flashpoint, every hour gained on the transit clock can alter political leverage. The mere sight of a U.S. carrier off a tense coastline is a strategic signal, and arriving days ahead of an adversary's expectations can upend their plans. The Navy drills not just for combat at sea, but for the launch itself, focusing on how fast the ship, crew, and air wing can shift from zero to maximum operational tempo. Aircraft readiness is the other half of this equation. A carrier at sea can launch its entire air wing for combat operations in as little as 20 minutes.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
The pier-to-full-speed transit isn't just about propulsion. It's about aligning all strike capabilities in parallel, while the ship's screws churn. Ordnance crews arm aircraft, flight deck crews spot jets, and radar operators sync with escort ships and airborne early warning systems. By the time the ship reaches full speed, the air wing is a heartbeat away from action. The Navy achieves this readiness through relentless repetition. Every deployment includes simulated fast starts where crews practice for a short notice order, stripping away every inefficiency. The goal is clear: no wasted motion, no delay in bringing American power to where it is needed. Nuclear propulsion removes fuel constraints, leaving crew readiness, weather, and port clearance as the only remaining variables. Crew readiness and weather are managed through training, while port clearance is mitigated by careful port selection and forward basing. The fastest transitions remain classified, but public data patterns show the Navy can deploy carriers in days, not weeks. This speed is not recklessness, it is calculated. At 30 knots, a carrier displaces a wall of water taller than a man, and stopping distances are measured in miles. This is why bridge crews are among the most highly drilled personnel, capable of making snap decisions while managing the movements of multiple ships and aircraft simultaneously. The psychology of this speed matters. Adversaries know a U.S. carrier can appear on their radar far earlier than anticipated. Allies know that a crisis can be met not just with a promise, but with steel on station. The peer-to-full-speed transit signals that the US can project decisive power faster than almost any other force on Earth. The moment the ship reaches full speed is electric for the crew. The pitch of the turbines, the vibration, and the sense that the ship is no longer idling but hunting changes the atmosphere. Watches are adjusted, communications with other ships become sharper, and a sense of purpose crystallizes. Once at full speed, the strike group doesn't just cruise. It maintains that velocity, using nuclear endurance to arrive on station with minimal delay. The air wing can begin flight operations within hours of departure, and escorts can immediately start anti-submarine and air defense patrols. Full speed isn't the endpoint, it's the bridge to immediate combat readiness. What emerges is a fusion of technology, training, and intent. This is proof that a carrier strike group's might is not just its size or firepower, but its ability to move when the nation calls. This transformation happens with the precision of a machine and a crew that has done it all before. They call it the Navy's invisible force multiplier. This strategy, the pre-positioning of assets, ensures the US Navy's ability to project power across oceans in days, not weeks. It is a deliberate, global game of logistics chess where supplies, weapons, aircraft parts, and entire combat kits are placed exactly where they will be needed, often before a crisis even begins. It's not about moving fast once war breaks out. It's about already being there. Imagine a Marine Expeditionary Brigade landing in a remote theater without their gear. Instead, their equipment is waiting for them, either in massive forward warehouses or aboard specialized ships anchored offshore. No scrambling for transport, no waiting for slow cargo ships to cross the Pacific. The centerpiece of this strategy is the Maritime Prepositioning Ships, MPS, essentially floating military supply bases operated by the Military Sea Lift Command. Each ship is packed with enough tanks, trucks, engineering equipment, ammunition, and food to sustain a Marine force for 30 days. Positioned in critical ocean regions like Diego Garcia or the Western Pacific, they are never far from potential flashpoints. When the call comes, they steam toward the action, bringing a brigade's worth of war-fighting tools.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
What makes these ships formidable is their independence. They carry their own cranes to offload gear at ports with minimal infrastructure. Where ports don't exist or are destroyed, they can deploy lighterage craft to bridge the sea-to-shore gap. This self-sufficiency means they can deliver combat power to almost any environment, contested or austere. Afloat pre-positioning is only half the story. The Navy and Marine Corps have also established a network of forward-deployed land facilities. These are not token outposts, they are high-capacity staging grounds. The Marine Corps facility at Subic Bay, for example, stores vehicles, communications arrays, and munitions, perfectly positioned for operations in the South China Sea. This cuts days or even weeks off deployment timelines. These sites and platforms contain war reserve materiel, which includes specialized equipment like mobile hospital units and aviation ground support kits, not just weapons. Strikingly, about half of the Navy's air munitions are kept afloat, riding the waves closer to where they might be used. The logic is simple. Moving bombs and missiles across continents is a delay the Navy cannot afford. This forward posture is more than convenient. It's a matter of survival. During the initial days of a major conflict, sea lift and airlift assets are highly contested resources. By pre-positioning, the Navy dramatically reduces its reliance on strategic transport, allowing troops to fly into a theater and link up with their pre-staged gear. This enables force closure, getting a full combat package in place to happen faster. In combat, speed is not a luxury. It is often the difference between seizing the initiative and playing catch-up. The genius of pre-positioning is its flexibility. A ship loaded for marine operations can pivot to a humanitarian mission without full reconfiguration. This adaptability allows the Navy to respond to everything from great power competition to humanitarian crises with the same assets. The global strategy is an intricate logistics web. The Navy's pre-positioning effort is not isolated. It is integrated into joint operations with the Army, Air Force, and allied militaries. This interoperability makes the entire U.S. military more agile and unpredictable to adversaries. In the opening phase of a conflict, logistics is the first battlefield. An adversary cannot engage forces that have not arrived, but once they do, the clock begins ticking on their ability to sustain themselves. Without a forward pipeline, even the most advanced forces burn through supplies faster than replacements can arrive. Pre-positioning flips this dynamic, front-loading the sustainment chain, so forces are not racing their own supply line. The psychology of this posture is as critical as the physical capability. To allies, pre-positioning signals commitment. To adversaries, it's a deterrent. They know that if they push, the U.S. can meet them with fully equipped forces in days, not months, which changes their risk calculus. Maintaining pre-positioned stocks is a constant battle against time and corrosion. The Navy runs continuous inspection and refurbishment cycles to ensure that every piece of equipment works as intended. Failures here would be catastrophic. Pre-positioned sites and ships are high-value targets, so the Navy disperses these assets and builds redundancy into the system. No single point of failure can cripple the network. If one ship is lost, another can be redirected. The scale is staggering. Each MPS squadron represents billions of dollars in gear and supplies, positioned months or years in advance. Ultimately, the pre-positioning strategy is about compressing time. By forward staging everything from tanks to tourniquets, the Navy makes oceans smaller and responses faster. This is how the U.S. can project power from Norfolk to the South China Sea without pause. In a world where crises unfold at digital speed, waiting for slow cargo convoys is a luxury no military can afford. The U.S. Navy's answer is to put the tools of the fight as close as possible to where the fight might be. It's a relentless discipline of readiness that ensures when the order comes, the Navy does not start moving. It starts acting. On the flight deck, a quiet order to launch in hours or less is the most important siren. From that moment, every crew member knows their exact position, their task, and the speed at which it must be completed. These are not ad hoc moves. They are the result of relentless drills designed to transform an empty deck into a launch pad for dozens of combat-ready aircraft. Underway flight operations drills rehearse a tempo that would break an unprepared crew. The launches and recoveries cycle without pause, keeping the air wing in motion. It's a rhythm built to last for hours or even days, practiced until the reaction is muscle memory. During these drills, pilots and deck crews simulate full combat conditions. Jets roaring into the wind, others trapped by arresting wires as new aircraft taxi forward to take their place. Nothing on deck is random. Each colored jersey represents a role defined by precision. Yellow shirts control the aircraft with hand signals that cut through the jet noise. Red shirts handle ordnance, arming each aircraft under the pressure of simulated threats. Green shirts maintain and operate the catapults and arresting gear, ensuring every launch is clean and safe. Purple shirts, the grapes, fuel the fleet with speed and accuracy. This choreography is exact because the deck is unforgiving. Aircraft must be fueled, armed, inspected, and positioned without collision or delay. Drills layer each step in a strict order. Refuel, load weapons, check systems, hook to the catapult. Timing is critical down to the second. One slip can cause launch delays that could cost lives in real combat. The rehearsals ensure that hundreds of moving parts act as one. Before any catapult fires, readiness drills ensure the launch machinery is flawless. Steam catapults, or the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, on the USS Gerald R. Ford are tested in rapid sequence, along with the arresting gear. The crew needs to know these systems will work repeatedly, without pause, under maximum strain. Rapid launch simulations push these limits further, with dozens of aircraft prepared in staggered stages so that the first wave can be airborne in under 15 minutes, and the rest of the air wing follows within an hour. The drills compress every task into an overlapping sequence to never let the deck sit still. Emergency scramble drills simulate surprise attacks or sudden orders for immediate air power. Here, the deck becomes organized chaos. Jets moving, crew sprinting, catapults cycling as fast as safety allows. Every second saved in these drills is a second gained in real combat. Advanced systems like emails allow for faster turnarounds between launches. Drills with emails focus on leveraging this efficiency, launching more jets in less time while demanding even higher precision. These drills are as much about psychology as mechanics. Crews are conditioned to remain calm amid urgency. They rehearse not just the actions, but the mindset. No hesitation, no second guessing, only execution. In a real crisis, a crew without this discipline and speed could lose the critical window for response. Every practice run is a rehearsal for the moment they hope never comes, but must always be ready for. Authority is earned through repetition. Readiness is not a state you declare, it's something you prove every time you run the drill. The identity of a carrier crew is forged here. They know their role is essential to the launch sequence, and the pride comes from being part of a team where a single delay could halt the entire operation. Urgency runs through every second of the process. The drills replicate the ticking clock so often that when it's real, it feels the same. No panic, no confusion, only motion. The payoff is a flight deck emptying into the sky with jets vanishing over the horizon one after another. In under an hour, the air wing is airborne and operational. The drills that seemed routine are the reason the carrier can respond instantly, ensuring that if war comes, they can meet it fully armed, fueled, and already in the air. They are among the largest and most powerful machines ever built, yet they can cross oceans at full speed for weeks without a single fuel stop. The secret is not in hidden tanks, but in a relentless, controlled fire at the ship's heart. A nuclear reactor that never sleeps. This core of fission-driven heat allows a nuclear-powered carrier to surpass the limitations of any fossil fuel vessel. While oil-powered ships must constantly plan around refueling, a nuclear carrier can launch from port, sustain over 30 knots for weeks, and still have decades of energy in reserve. This fact changes everything about how these giants operate, where they can go, and how quickly they can get there. The science begins at the atomic level. Inside the reactor core, nuclear fission releases millions of times more energy per unit mass than burning oil. This staggering energy density gives the carrier its near-limitless range. There is no combustion and no smoke. The immense heat transfers from the reactor to the ship's steam system, which transforms water into high-pressure steam. This steam powers the main turbines, which turn the propeller shafts, pushing the 100,000-ton ship forward. The result is a sustained cruising speed that rivals the fastest conventional warships, maintained for weeks, not hours. The same steam also spins electrical generators, powering the ship's vast network of systems, from catapults and radars to climate control and galleys. The process is a closed loop. The steam cools back into water, which is then reheated and used again. The nuclear fuel remains in place, splitting slowly over years. The reactor can run continuously for 2 decades or more before the core needs refueling. In theory, a carrier could circle the globe at high speed dozens of times before its next fuel stop. In practice, ships return to port for crew rotation and replenishment of food, ammunition, and aviation fuel, but not for their own propulsion needs. The operational advantages are immense. Speed is life in naval warfare, and the ability to sustain it allows nuclear carriers to respond to crises anywhere on Earth with minimal delay. A carrier group can move at flank speed without worrying about rendezvousing with a vulnerable refueling ship. This means fewer predictable choke points for the enemy to target. The Nimitz-class carriers, with their 2 Westinghouse A4W reactors, generate enough power for propulsion to rival the fastest conventional warships, plus enough electricity to power a small city. All this energy comes from a fuel load measured in tons, not the tens of thousands of tons of oil a conventional carrier would require. Over the ship's life, this saves billions in fuel logistics and allows it to operate where fuel infrastructure is non-existent or hostile. The reactor compartments are sealed, shielded, and constantly monitored by trained nuclear specialists who ensure the plant operates within exacting safety margins. For allies, a nuclear carrier is a visible reassurance that help can arrive swiftly and stay indefinitely. For adversaries, it's a reminder that distance is no defense. A conventional fleet's endurance is a known quantity. Its supply lines can be tracked. A nuclear carrier breaks that equation, introducing unpredictability into any strategic calculation. The knowledge that such a vessel can steam into contested waters without warning, stay for months, and leave without a trace of fuel consumption is a deterrent in itself. The logistics officer on a conventional ship must account for fuel burn rates and tanker schedules. On a nuclear carrier, the focus shifts to ordnance, aviation fuel, and food. This changes the operational mindset from how far can we go to where should we go. The ship's speed and range become tools of diplomacy, power projection, and rapid crisis intervention. The ability of a carrier group to apply power at a moment's notice is built on speed and reach. But speed has a hidden cost. The faster a fleet moves, the quicker it burns through fuel, ammunition, and supplies. Most logistics ships cannot keep up with a sprinting carrier group. This is why the US Navy developed a unique vessel, the Fast Combat Support Ship, designated AOE. These are not slow, plodding resupply hulks. They are high-speed giants that combine the cargo capacity of multiple support vessels with the speed and endurance to run alongside the most powerful warships on Earth. A Nimitz, or Ford-class carrier, flanked by cruisers and destroyers, can move at over 30 knots. At these speeds, a conventional oiler or ammo ship falls behind, creating a strategic gap. If the carrier must slow down to resupply, the group becomes more vulnerable and risks losing momentum. The Fast Combat Support Ship eliminates this vulnerability, acting as the carrier group's shadow, always within reach and ready to deliver fuel and ordnance. The first class for this role, the Sacramento class, were massive ships, powered by the same steam turbine engines as aircraft carriers, allowing them to keep pace with the strike group. Their design merged the roles of a fleet oiler, an ammunition ship, and a supply vessel into a single hull, making them a one-stop resupply platform. This was more than efficient. It was a decisive edge. The supply-class Fast Combat Support Ships, their successors, are the largest combat logistics ships ever built for the Navy. They can carry over 177,000 barrels of fuel and thousands of tons of ammunition and stores, enabling sustained combat operations for an entire carrier strike group without a return to port. They have advanced underway replenishment stations on both sides, allowing them to refuel multiple ships simultaneously while transferring pallets of bombs and provisions. Helicopter facilities on deck support, vertical replenishment, moving critical cargo directly to the carrier's flight deck without slowing the convoy. The choreography of an AOE replenishment is a display of precision under pressure. The support ship matches course and speed with the carrier and its escorts, a maneuver requiring immense skill with tens of thousands of tons of steel moving at high speed, separated by only a few hundred feet. Fuel hoses stretch across the gap, pumping thousands of gallons per minute, while cargo pallets swing on tensioned lines or are flown over by helicopter. All of this occurs while the strike group maintains its pace, with its eyes scanning for threats. The strategic value is clear. An AOE's presence means the carrier can remain on station longer, strike farther, and react faster. Without this high-speed logistics lifeline, the carrier's endurance is sharply cut, forcing it to choose between breaking contact to resupply or risking running dry in contested waters. The number of Fast Combat Support Ships has dwindled. While the Navy uses slower oilers and dry cargo ships, these cannot sprint with the strike group. This creates a critical distinction. Slower auxiliaries can support a group in peacetime, but in a conflict, that luxury vanishes. The ability to sustain maximum speed without interruption could mean the difference between outmaneuvering an enemy and being fixed in place. Experts warn that this capability gap could widen as modern naval strategy shifts to distributed operations. AoE-type ships are force multipliers, capable of shifting between dispersed elements without forcing them to regroup. Admiral-level planners have noted that sustaining fast-moving groups in contested seas will depend on having enough high-speed support capacity. A sailor views an AoE as a warship, and its crew trains for damage control and defense, just like the combatants it supports. On some deployments, an AoE might complete dozens of replenishments in a single month. For carrier aviators and deck crews, the sight of an AoE steaming into position is both reassurance and a signal. Reassurance because it means more sorties can be flown and more munitions expended. Signal because it means operations will not slow down. The pace will remain relentless. That pace is a weapon. An adversary tracking a carrier group knows it has a finite sprint time without fast support. The presence of an AoE changes that calculation, allowing the sprint to continue indefinitely. This is a quiet but potent form of power projection, visible only to those watching closely enough to see the replenishment lines crossing between ships at speed. In an age where high-speed naval operations may decide the opening moves of a conflict, these ships remain one of the most strategically valuable yet least recognized assets in the fleet. The public sees a carrier group slicing across the ocean at full speed, but they do not see the constant burn of fuel or the dwindling supplies. The AoE is why that image can endure for days, weeks, or months without a pause. It is the lifeline that allows the carrier to be what it is meant to be: a fast, unrelenting, global instrument of American sea power. It embodies the principle that a fleet moves at the speed of its slowest ship, unless you build a supply ship that can keep up with the fastest. The US Navy did just that, and as long as carrier strike groups remain the tip of the spear, the AoE will remain the unseen edge that keeps the spear sharp. When an American aircraft carrier strike group appears on the horizon without warning, it is not simply a ship arriving, it is the arrival of a fully mobile, sovereign piece of the United States, bristling with jets, missiles, and the unmistakable message that Washington has decided to get directly involved. This sudden appearance can upend the calculations of allies and adversaries alike in a single night. From the tense waters of the Middle East to the vast expanse of the Indo-Pacific, there are moments when the US Navy has shifted the balance of a crisis not with words, but with steel decks and the roar of fighter engines. In the Middle East, a region of constant volatility, the sudden arrival of a US carrier strike group has often been the difference between escalation and deterrence. When the USS Abraham Lincoln steamed into the Eastern Mediterranean, the move was more than symbolic. It placed dozens of FA-18 Super Hornets within striking distance of key flashpoints. Similar deployments of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, USS Carl Vinson, and USS Gerald R. Ford have been calculated to both reassure allies and signal to adversaries that any aggressive move would be met with a rapid and overwhelming response. In some cases, the US has positioned two carrier strike groups in the same theater at once. This concentration of power is rare. Each group is a floating armada of destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and logistical ships. When two such groups operated concurrently in the Middle East, the Pentagon made no secret of its intent to send a very powerful deterrence message to Iran. The reaction was immediate. Intelligence reports indicated that planned hostile actions were paused, missile deployments were delayed, and certain proxy operations were put on hold. The shift in adversarial posture was not due to diplomacy alone, but because the cost of provocation had just skyrocketed overnight. This pattern has repeated in response to specific triggers such as a threat to close the Strait of Hormuz. In each case, the carrier's arrival condensed the U.S. decision-making cycle into action. It is a kind of crisis management that operates in real time, compressing geography and eliminating the safe buffer of distance that aggressors might otherwise exploit. However, this ability to surge into the Middle East comes with a trade-off, one felt most acutely in the Western Pacific and Indo-Pacific. These are regions where carrier presence is equally critical as a counterweight to China's naval expansion and North Korea's unpredictability. When the USS Abraham Lincoln redeployed from the Pacific to the Middle East, it created a temporary carrier gap in Asia, a reminder that even a global superpower must prioritize. The message was clear: the crisis in the Middle East was urgent enough to warrant risk elsewhere. Adversaries take note of these shifts. Beijing has used such moments to test operations beyond the first island chain, sailing its own carriers further into the Pacific as a signal of China's growing reach. In this way, every sudden U.S. deployment is not just about the region it enters, but about the strategic ripples it sends across the globe. When a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group appears without warning off the coast of any nation, the water changes before the weather does. The sudden arrival of a U.S. carrier has a well-established effect, whether it's near Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula, or the South China Sea. Its presence emboldens allied nations who depend on American naval support to maintain their maritime claims. At the same time, it forces China and North Korea into a state of high alert. The deterrent value is not abstract. It's measured in the number of sorties not flown, the patrol boats recalled, and the missile tests postponed. Their sophisticated radar, tuned to detect the known, was deaf to the inevitable. Between the Indo-Pacific and the Eastern Mediterranean, a U.S. carrier can influence multiple crisis zones at once, including the Levant, North Africa, and the broader Mediterranean basin. The region's geography is uniquely suited to carrier power projection. From a single location, U.S. aircraft can reach the skies over Israel, Lebanon, Syria, or even parts of the Red Sea. This flexibility is why the Eastern Mediterranean has seen so many sudden carrier arrivals during periods of tension. When violence has erupted along the Israel-Lebanon border, or when terrorist groups have launched attacks, the U.S. has positioned carriers here to maintain both deterrence and rapid strike options. Such deployments are rarely announced far in advance. The element of surprise is a core part of the strategy. Satellite imagery might reveal a carrier leaving its home port, but by the time it reaches its destination, the geopolitical equation has already shifted. The psychological impact is enormous. A carrier's mere presence signals not just the possibility of American intervention, but the inevitability of it if certain lines are crossed. The mountain, once their shield, became a monument to their miscalculation. For adversaries, it transforms hypothetical scenarios into immediate, high-risk realities. For allies, it is an unmistakable sign that the U.S. is willing to put its most valuable naval assets in harm's way for their defense. The carrier strike group's arrival also changes the informational environment. News outlets broadcast images of the ship offshore, and social media circulates video of its jets taking off. This message spreads faster than formal diplomacy ever could. The U.S. leverages the visibility of its carriers as a form of strategic communication that bypasses back-channel talks and goes straight to the public and leadership of all sides. The image of a carrier's flight deck, alive with activity, is as much a tool of influence as its Tomahawk missiles. Critically, these deployments are not just about potential offensive action. They also bring a defensive shield. Carrier-based aircraft can provide air cover for U.S. and allied forces, intercept hostile aircraft, and monitor vast areas for missile launches. In volatile regions, this protective umbrella can mean the difference between a contained incident and a regional war. It is this dual capability, to strike hard and to defend effectively, that makes the carrier's sudden arrival such a potent crisis-altering factor. The overnight nature of these shifts cannot be overstated. In many documented cases, the situation before the carrier's arrival was on a clear trajectory toward escalation. Within 24 hours of its appearance, the calculus changed. Leaders who had been willing to test boundaries pulled back. Military planners on all sides rewrote their orders. The combination of speed, flexibility, and overwhelming force projection allowed the U.S. to insert itself into the timeline of a crisis before events reached the point of no return. The broader implication is that carrier strike groups are not just military assets. They are instruments of foreign policy that operate in the space between diplomacy and combat. Their mobility allows the U.S. to apply pressure precisely where and when it is needed, without the long-term commitments of a ground deployment. This makes them ideal tools for managing unpredictable crises, where conditions can deteriorate rapidly, but may also be diffused without direct conflict if the right balance of deterrence and assurance is applied. What took them years to bury took seconds to exhume. The Middle East, the Western Pacific, and the Eastern Mediterranean will remain the primary stages for this kind of naval signaling. These regions combine high-stakes, active flashpoints and geopolitical complexity, where the sudden projection of American military power can alter outcomes almost instantly. The record is clear. From deterring missile strikes to calming a volatile border, from reassuring allies to countering Chinese maneuvers, the rapid arrival of a U.S. carrier strike group has repeatedly rewritten the script of unfolding crises. And in every case, the impact is felt not in weeks or months, but in hours. That is the unique power of these floating airfields, to cross oceans, to appear without warning, and to shift the trajectory of events before they spiral beyond control. For friends, it is a promise kept in steel and jet fuel. For adversaries, it is a reminder that in the calculus of conflict, timing and presence can matter as much as firepower, and that the United States can change both in the span of a single night. In the high-stakes world of global naval operations, communication is as much a weapon as any missile or aircraft. For the U.S. Navy's carrier strike groups, racing across oceans at high speed means not just moving hardware, but moving information securely, invisibly, and without tipping off adversaries who are constantly hunting for the smallest digital trace. The enemy isn't always a submarine lurking below. It's the unseen ear in the ether, ready to intercept a stray signal and turn it into a targeting solution. This is why the Navy treats communication security as a survival imperative, weaving encryption, emission control, and operational discipline into a seamless shield around the fleet. At the heart of this shield is encryption. Every word, coordinate, and fragment of mission data traveling between ships, aircraft, and command centers is locked down with advanced cryptographic systems. It's not just about scrambling the message, it's about ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability in an environment where compromise is unacceptable. End-to-end encryption runs through dedicated military communication systems, bolstered by certified commercial cryptographic products for interoperability. Even the data resting quietly on a ship's server is encrypted, with strict protocols for handling and storage. In a carrier strike group, a hard drive isn't just a piece of hardware, it's a potential liability if captured. So, disk encryption and controlled access are non-negotiable. But even perfect encryption can't hide the fact that a transmission exists. This is where emission control, EMCON, becomes a decisive tactic. In contested waters, or when shadowed by rival navies, strike groups can go dark, sharply reducing their electronic footprint. Radars go silent, radio chatter disappears, satellite links go dormant. Instead of broadcasting their presence across the spectrum, ships slip into receive-only or ultra-low emission modes, quietly gathering intelligence without revealing their position. This isn't an occasional drill, it's a rehearsed discipline. In a high-threat scenario, a carrier group might vanish from the electromagnetic map entirely, its location guessed but never confirmed by an adversary. Even under EMCON, communication doesn't stop, it simply changes form. The Navy keeps a portfolio of redundant, low-emission methods, including secure high-frequency radio links that can pierce through atmospheric noise and operate under strict emission control. These systems, resistant to jamming and interference, are less flashy than satellites, but stubbornly reliable when modern channels are compromised. They're the reason a strike group can still coordinate strikes, relay reconnaissance, and maintain command integrity even in a degraded environment. Modern carriers like USS Abraham Lincoln have tested high-bandwidth satellite internet via commercial constellations such as Starlink, enabling rapid intelligence updates and mission planning. But in the communications war, convenience is a vulnerability. These high-speed links are tools to be used with surgical caution, activated in permissive zones, shut down instantly in sensitive waters. Every burst of data is a possible beacon to hostile sensors, and the Navy treats that risk with zero complacency. The balance is always between speed and stealth wins when the situation turns hostile. Their confidence, built on layers of reinforced concrete, was a flimsy curtain before the storm. The Navy's cybersecurity architecture rests increasingly on a zero-trust model. In this paradigm, no device, user, or network segment is inherently trusted. Access is verified continuously, not just at login. Endpoints are hardened, agentless security measures are deployed, and authentication systems are monitored in real time. Even within the strike group's own network, segmentation and access controls ensure that a compromised node can't cascade into a fleet-wide breach. This digital compartmentalization mirrors the physical compartmentalization of a warship. Damage in one section should never sink the whole vessel. Operational discipline is the human side of the equation, and it's as critical as the hardware. Unauthorized Wi-Fi setups, unsecured laptops, or personal devices are treated not as minor infractions, but as breaches that could jeopardize the entire mission. There's no tolerance for harmless shortcuts when those shortcuts can be exploited by a cyber adversary. Communications personnel are trained to follow protocol without exception, because in this domain, one careless moment can undo months of planning. Beyond defending its own channels, a carrier strike group maintains organic intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. Aircraft, drones, and shipborne sensors feed data into secure networks without relying on external systems that might be denied or degraded. This autonomy ensures that even cut off from satellites or land-based relays, the group can sustain awareness of its environment, coordinate internally, and keep its operational edge. In a high-end conflict, that ability to fight disconnected can determine whether a mission succeeds or fails. The stakes are magnified by the nature of carrier operations. A carrier strike group is a floating city with a high-value target painted on it, capable of projecting power hundreds of miles inland. Its movements are watched, studied, and probed by every potential adversary. In this environment, communication security isn't just about keeping secrets, it's about denying the enemy the intelligence they need to act. If an adversary can't find you, they can't fix you as a target. If they can't fix you, they can't strike you. Every layer, from encryption to MCON to zero trust, feeds into that single strategic aim. Stay hidden, stay secure, stay in control. They fired first. We simply ensured they wouldn't fire again. The Navy's doctrine reflects decades of adaptation to both technological change and shifting threat landscapes. The introduction of faster satellite internet is counterbalanced by stricter control policies. The adoption of zero-trust models is paired with training that reinforces the human factor. Redundant comms methods are preserved alongside cutting-edge systems, ensuring resilience. In practice, this means that during a high-speed transit across the globe, a strike group may move from a high-bandwidth, connected environment to complete radio silence within hours without losing command cohesion. Orders are preloaded, data bursts are encrypted and transmitted in narrow windows. HF radio stands ready to carry essential traffic when other links are shuttered. Every ship knows the playbook. Every crew member understands the stakes. The psychology of this environment is demanding. For sailors, going dark can feel like isolation, but it's also a statement of control. In the electromagnetic battle space, silence is not absence, it's dominance. When the strike group chooses when and how to speak, it robs the adversary of initiative. That discipline transforms communication from a vulnerability into an asset. Ultimately, the Navy's communication security during high-speed global movements is not a single technology or policy. It's an ecosystem. It thrives on layered defense, constant vigilance, and a culture that treats information with the same caution as ammunition. Encryption hides the message, MCON hides the messenger. Redundant systems ensure survival, and operational discipline keeps the human element aligned with mission needs. This ecosystem allows the carrier strike group to operate at full speed, anywhere on the globe, without sacrificing the security of its command and control. In a world where a single intercepted transmission can shift the balance of power, the US Navy has built a framework that assumes nothing is safe until proven secure, and nothing is transmitted without a reason. It's not paranoia, it's survival. The sea has no patience for speed. A US Navy aircraft carrier strike group may be built for power, precision, and sustained operations, but when the weather turns hostile, raw propulsion means nothing without control. High winds, violent waves, poor visibility, and the confines of geography all conspire to slow even the most formidable fleet. The limits aren't just technical, they're dictated by the laws of physics and the unforgiving character of the ocean itself. When winds rise above 30 knots, the carrier's vast superstructure becomes a wall against the gale. Resistance builds, fuel efficiency plummets, and handling becomes delicate. At over 60 knots in a severe storm, the ship's 100,000-ton bulk meets an invisible force that bends steel plans to its will. These winds whip the sea into chaos, pushing swells into erratic patterns that demand constant helm corrections. The flight deck, designed as the ultimate runway, becomes an exposed plain where turbulence and crosswinds make aircraft launch and recovery dangerous, sometimes impossible. The rough seas are an adversary of their own. In heavy weather, waves can climb to heights exceeding 30 feet, walls of water that hammer the bow and send spray high over the island tower. Each crest and trough sets off a chain reaction, pitching forward, rolling side to side, and yawing unpredictably. These motions aren't just discomfort for the crew. They are structural stress events, each one testing the welds, the fixtures, and the stability of aircraft secured on deck. Push a carrier too hard in such conditions, and the pounding can crack fittings, shift cargo, or throw a crewman into danger. The rest of the strike group, destroyers, cruisers, and support ships, must endure the same punishment, each one adjusting speed to remain in tight formation without collision. Their arrogance, built on a map with clean lines, was a fragile fiction against the chaos of nature. Wave direction can be the deciding factor between a controlled run and a hazardous slog. Beam seas, waves hitting from the side, induce rolling that can surpass safe limits for flight ops if the angle and height align poorly. Following seas, hitting from astern, may seem less violent, but they can cause the ship to yaw unpredictably as swells pass under the stern. The carrier's stabilizers and ballast controls can fight some of this motion, but they are not magic. Once roll exceeds about 3 degrees, launch and recovery cycles become unsafe, and captains will cut speed to reduce the violence of motion. That decision can mean the difference between getting aircraft aloft to defend the group or keeping them grounded. Geography tightens the constraints further. In confined waters, like the Persian Gulf, weather is only one factor. The narrow channels, dense tanker and cargo ship traffic, and the constant awareness of potential hostile threats mean a carrier cannot simply open the throttles. Speed here is constrained by turn radius, escort positioning, and the unpredictable maneuvers of nearby vessels. In these situations, captains often sacrifice velocity for the ability to react instantly, choosing safety over haste when a miscalculation could trap the ship in a dangerous position. Precipitation adds its own set of problems. Heavy rain and thunderstorms don't just reduce visibility, they transform the air over the deck into a turbulent mess. Pilots rely on stable wind over the flight deck for safe launch and recovery, but in downpours or squalls, that wind becomes erratic. Electrical storms present an even greater hazard, with the possibility of lightning strikes to aircraft, deck equipment, or fueling operations. Flight schedules are often adjusted on the fly, with the carrier altering heading to find a better wind line or to run out of the worst weather. In the meantime, speed may be cut to stabilize the ship's motion and reduce the hazards of slippery decks and obscured sightlines. These environmental challenges are not met with resignation. Modern carriers use sophisticated stabilization systems, hydrodynamic fins to counter-roll, ballast tanks to adjust trim, and constant radar and satellite weather feeds to plan routes and angles of approach. Navigators and meteorologists aboard the strike group work together, sometimes adjusting course by mere degrees to transform a beam sea into a more manageable head sea, or plotting a longer route to skirt the edge of a storm. But even with the best technology and planning, certain combinations of wind, wave, and location force the same hard truth. The fastest path is not always the safest or the most effective. For the crew, these limitations are lived realities. In the engineering spaces, operators watch engine loads fluctuate as propellers bite into turbulent water. On the bridge, officers scan radar plots and weather overlays, balancing urgency against the knowledge that pressing too hard could damage the ship or its aircraft. High winds can close the flight deck entirely, delaying air missions that may be critical to the strike group's larger operation. Large swells can force a ship into patterns of course correction that stretch distances and burn more fuel. Confined waters can trap a carrier in a tactical box where speed is meaningless if maneuverability is lost. The ocean offers no appeal process. Every knot of speed must be earned against its resistance. In global deployment, the Navy's advantage is mobility. A carrier strike group can reposition thousands of miles in days when conditions allow. But nature can steal that edge. A storm in the mid-Pacific, a monsoon in the Indian Ocean, or a winter gale in the North Atlantic can add days to a transit. Those delays ripple outward, affecting when aircraft can be on station, when resupply ships can rendezvous, and when the carrier can relieve another unit on deployment. The fleet's planners know this and build weather windows into operational timelines. But no forecast is perfect, and sometimes the only option is to slow down and ride it out. The reality is that the U.S. Navy trains for these constraints. Drills simulate sudden weather shifts, preparing bridge teams to make rapid course and speed changes. Aircraft handling crews practice securing and moving planes in rough conditions. Engineers know how to bring power up or down smoothly to prevent overstressing systems when the captain orders a change. These practices turn raw seamanship into a kind of choreography, one that acknowledges the sea's dominance while extracting every safe advantage from the ship's design. Their short-term gains, built on a foundation of quicksand, were swept away in a single tide. Yet the most sobering truth is that no amount of power or preparation can erase the limits set by wind and wave. A carrier may be the largest moving airfield in the world, but when the ocean rises in fury, the group moves at the pace the sea permits. Commanders accept this not as weakness, but as part of the operating environment, another factor to be managed with skill, patience, and a constant eye on the balance between mission and safety. Every knot of lost speed is a calculation, not a defeat. High winds, rough seas, and geographic constraints are not signs of vulnerability. They are reminders that even the most advanced naval force exists in partnership with the elements. The strike group's mission is not just to move fast, but to arrive ready, intact, and fully capable of action. That means knowing when to sprint, when to maneuver, and when to slow to let the sea have its way. In that balance lies the enduring power of the carrier strike group, not in defying nature, but in mastering the art of working within its limits. Even before the carrier's destination comes into view, the air wing is already at war in its own way. Not with live weapons or hostile forces, but through an unbroken chain of training that transforms transit time into a combat rehearsal. On the flight deck, in ready rooms, and in the nerve centers of the ship, every hour underway is part of a deliberate, high-pressure preparation cycle. The goal is to ensure that when the first real mission order comes, execution is immediate, precise, and lethal. There's no such thing as dead time between ports, only the next evolution in readiness. Their hesitation, a luxury they once afforded themselves, became a weapon against them. From the moment an air wing leaves its home bases, the clock is ticking. Pilots and crews, having completed their workup cycle, now face the final phase, sustained integration at sea. Before deployment, these squadrons have already been through the crucible of exercises like Comp2X, a multi-week gauntlet that tests every element of a carrier strike group's warfighting ability. The scenarios are complex and relentless. Joint maritime operations, contested airspace, live and simulated weapons employment, all designed to reveal weaknesses before the ship crosses into contested waters. The point isn't just to pass a checklist, it's to prove that when multiple squadrons launch into the same fight, they operate as a single, synchronized weapon. Once the carrier turns toward its operational theater, integration accelerates. Each squadron brings its own mission specialty. Strike fighters perfecting precision bombing runs, electronic attack crews jamming simulated enemy radars, helicopter units conducting anti-submarine sweeps. But none of it matters if they can't fight as one. That's why underway training focuses on collective execution. Simulated strikes aren't just about hitting targets. They're about coordinating dozens of aircraft, maintaining radio discipline, navigating complex airspace, and adjusting on the fly when the scenario throws in unexpected threats. Every simulated launch and recovery cycle is timed, logged, and debriefed. Because in combat, seconds mean survival. The work is as mental as it is physical. Pilots rehearse rapid decision-making in scenarios designed to overwhelm them. Enemy fighters appearing out of nowhere, weather closing in mid-mission, sudden changes to rules of engagement. In the ready rooms, mission planning cells pore over maps, threat assessments, and intelligence updates, building mental muscle memory for when those same problems appear in real life. The carrier itself becomes a living classroom. The air boss managing launch and recovery tempo, the strike group commander integrating air operations with surface and subsurface assets, and the training officer orchestrating a constantly shifting schedule to maximize every pilot's proficiency. Even during long stretches of open ocean, the pace never slows. Continuous skill refreshers are built into the daily rhythm, carrier landings to hone precision, formation flights to reinforce coordination, weapons employment drills to keep muscle memory sharp. Every landing, every sortie is another rep toward readiness. Combat mission rehearsals are where the training becomes razor-sharp. Air-to-air intercepts, coordinated bombing runs, suppression of enemy air defenses. Each mission set is flown in the same way it would be in theater, complete with real-time changes from controllers to simulate the chaos of war. Pilots practice cyclic ops, rapid launch and recovery periods designed to generate the maximum number of sorties in the shortest time. It's an exhausting tempo, but it mirrors what they might face in a high-intensity conflict, where the carrier must keep aircraft in the fight around the clock. Command and control exercises layer in another level of complexity. The carrier's Combat Direction Center works hand-in-hand with the air wing to manage the air picture, vector fighters toward intercepts, and coordinate with other U.S. and allied forces. Secure communications protocols are tested and retested. Data links are exercised to ensure that every aircraft, ship, and supporting unit sees the same operational picture. These are not abstract drills. Without seamless command and control, even the best pilots can't execute their missions effectively. The role of the training officer is pivotal in this constant churn. New pilots may join mid-deployment and must be integrated without slowing the tempo. This means targeted flights to bring them up to speed, pairing them with experienced wingmen, and ensuring they've mastered not only their own aircraft, but the tactics of the entire air wing. The training plan isn't static. It evolves in real time based on the latest intelligence, emerging threats, and lessons learned from ongoing exercises. Psychologically, this relentless training does more than sharpen skills. It builds a mindset. Pilots and crews learn to live at a state of readiness, where the gap between training and combat all but disappears. The result is a force that arrives in theater already operating at combat tempo, already synchronized, and already capable of executing missions at short notice. For adversaries, that readiness is a deterrent. For allies, it's a reassurance that the carrier strike group is more than a symbol. It's a functioning, lethal instrument of power. Every repetition, every drill, every debrief during transit serves the same purpose: to remove hesitation from the moment of truth. When the call comes to launch real-world operations, The pilots aren't shaking off rust or finding their rhythm. They're simply doing what they've been doing all along, only now with live weapons and real stakes. The long miles across the ocean aren't downtime. They're the runway to war, and the air wing hits the deck ready to fly. By the time the carrier reaches its destination, the air wing is not just qualified, it's combat-proven, in every way short of actual combat. The integration is seamless, the communication instinctive, the execution immediate. This is the product of a system built on continuous integrated training, one where transit isn't a pause between missions, but the crucible that ensures the next mission will succeed. In that sense, the voyage itself is the first battle, and victory is measured not in kills, but in the unshakable certainty that when the order comes, the air wing is already there. When a U.S. Navy carrier strike group appears on the horizon, it's not just a collection of steel, jets, and sailors. It's a statement, a sudden, undeniable reminder that the United States can put the most powerful war-fighting formation in history anywhere on the planet in days, not weeks. For adversaries, the arrival of a carrier is not just a tactical shift, it's a psychological earthquake. And history has repeatedly shown that when the Navy moves fast, the intimidation factor multiplies. In 2004, the Navy set out to prove just how far and how quickly it could push its fleet. Exercise Summer Pulse 2004 was the first full demonstration of the new Fleet Response Plan, a strategy designed to surge multiple carrier strike groups at once. Over the span of a single month, 7 carriers were underway simultaneously in different parts of the globe. It wasn't about engaging a specific enemy, it was about sending a message. If tensions flare in multiple regions, the Navy can bring overwhelming maritime force to bear in each, without thinning its strength elsewhere. For allies, it was reassurance. For rivals, it was a calculation changer. 7 carriers moving in concert is more than firepower. It's visible proof of global reach and sustained readiness. Fast forward to 2017, and the Navy wasn't playing war games. The world was watching a volatile standoff with North Korea, where missile tests were ratcheting up tensions in the Western Pacific. The USS Carl Vinson Strike Group had been operating in the Indian Ocean when orders came down to redeploy. Not next month, not next week, but now. In a rapid maneuver that covered half the globe, the Carl Vinson steamed through the South China Sea and positioned off the Korean Peninsula. The sudden appearance of a fully armed carrier strike group in those waters shifted the tone of the crisis overnight. The message was simple. Any escalation would be met with immediate, massive, and precise military power. The same dynamic has played out repeatedly in the Middle East, where rapid deployments have become a strategic reflex. In recent years, carriers like the USS Abraham Lincoln, USS Theodore Roosevelt, USS Carl Vinson, and USS Gerald R. Ford have surged toward the Persian Gulf or Eastern Mediterranean with little public warning. Sometimes these moves were in response to Iranian threats against shipping. Other times, they came amid flare-ups involving Israel and other regional actors. Each time, the effect was the same. Overnight, a crisis zone was within striking range of hundreds of naval aircraft, backed by the layered defenses and missile capabilities of the strike group. Their sophisticated calculations, based on a predictable timetable, were a casualty of our unpredictability. The tempo changes the moment those ships arrive. Hostile actors reassess, allies breathe easier, and negotiations take on a new urgency. The USS Harry S. Truman offered another textbook example of carrier intimidation during its rapid deployment to the Eastern Mediterranean in support of strikes against ISIS. The timing and route were deliberately unpredictable, reinforcing a U.S. strategy designed to keep potential adversaries guessing. In an age where military movements are often tracked in real time by satellites and open-source intelligence, that unpredictability becomes a force multiplier. Adversaries can't be sure when, or from where, the next wave of air power might launch. In 2025, this show of force extended into the European theater. The USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group deployed to Europe alongside 2 other carrier strike groups positioned in the Middle East, creating a concentrated display of naval power that sent ripples through the strategic calculus in both Moscow and Tehran. This wasn't just about presence. It was about simultaneous deterrence in two separate hotspots, proving that even in a complex global security environment, the US could mass power in more than one place at a time without leaving gaps elsewhere. What makes these deployments so potent is that they collapse the timeline of response. In traditional military terms, moving large formations across oceans takes weeks of planning and transit. A carrier strike group's ability to surge into a theater within days compresses the decision-making window for any potential adversary. They are suddenly faced with the reality that any action they take could trigger immediate retaliation from a formation capable of launching sustained airstrikes, enforcing blockades, or escorting allied forces. This speed doesn't just project power, it projects inevitability. The arrival of a carrier isn't a vague threat. It's a visible, undeniable reality. The Air Wing's fighters, electronic warfare planes, and surveillance aircraft begin flying patrols. The destroyers and cruisers in the group start radar sweeps and missile watch. Submarines operating unseen extend the group's reach below the surface. Every one of those actions is observed and interpreted by those in the region, and the conclusion is always the same. The US is ready to act now. The intimidation factor is amplified by the carrier strike group's versatility. It's not just about offensive strikes, though that option is always on the table. The group can conduct humanitarian operations, enforce no-fly zones, escort shipping lanes, or stage joint exercises with allies. This flexibility means adversaries can't predict the exact mission set, adding to the uncertainty and psychological pressure. History shows that the mere presence of a carrier can de-escalate tensions without a shot being fired. Their grand strategy, based on a vacuum of power, was rendered irrelevant by a single ship. During Summer Pulse, some potential hotspots saw a cooling of rhetoric as soon as it became clear that a strike group was nearby. In the Korean crisis, the Carl Vinson's arrival coincided with a pause in certain provocative actions. In the Middle East, sudden carrier arrivals have halted attacks on commercial shipping and recalibrated regional military postures. There's also a symbolic layer that shouldn't be underestimated. For US allies, a carrier's arrival is a visible pledge of support, a steel and jet guarantee that their security concerns are not being ignored. For adversaries, it's a reminder of the strategic imbalance they face in any direct confrontation. Few nations can field even one carrier capable of sustained combat operations. None can match the US Navy's ability to deploy multiple such groups simultaneously. Carrier strike groups are more than mobile air bases. They're floating centers of gravity in global geopolitics. Their rapid deployment capability allows the United States to shape events rather than react passively to them. Whether it's a planned exercise like Summer Pulse, a crisis response like the Carl Vinson in 2017, or simultaneous deterrence operations in 2025, the effect is consistent. Adversaries are forced to reconsider their timelines, options, and level of aggression. The intimidation factor lies not just in what a carrier can do, but in how quickly it can appear where it's needed most. That speed denies opponents the luxury of gradual escalation. It turns their calculated risk-taking into a gamble they can lose in a matter of hours. And as history has shown, the moment those carriers arrive, the rules of the game change, sometimes without a single missile launched or bomb dropped. For the United States, this is strategic leverage of the highest order. For anyone on the other side, it's a reason to think twice. The lesson from these past operations is clear. Rapid carrier deployments aren't just about moving ships. They're about moving the needle in global crises, often before the first shot is fired. To an ally, the sudden silhouette of a Nimitz-class or Ford-class carrier on the horizon is not a question mark. It's an exclamation point. It means the United States has moved beyond words and placed steel, aircraft, and thousands of sailors within immediate reach. It's the kind of arrival that shortens decision-making cycles, concentrates political will, and makes potential aggressors think twice before moving a single inch. For allies, the message is both emotional and strategic. It says, "You are not alone." This reassurance isn't abstract. It's measured in the radar signatures of E-2D Hawkeyes circling overhead, the deck crews cycling FA-18s through launch, and the electronic eyes of an Aegis cruiser locked on the horizon. It is the practical comfort of knowing that a strike group can sustain combat air patrols, launch precision strikes, and control sea lanes, all while feeding live intelligence into Allied command networks. That capability tightens alliance bonds in a way no summit communique can. Joint exercises begin almost instantly. Data flows increase. A sudden carrier arrival can unify political messaging, harden public confidence, and close ranks against shared threats. In a tense, regional moment, the value to an ally is also psychological. Leaders can face their own public and point, literally, to a carrier deck bristling with aircraft as proof that promises are not just paper. For nations feeling the heat of an adversary's buildup, the strike group is a visible guarantee that the U.S. will bleed resources and risk assets to maintain the balance. This assurance changes the tempo of diplomacy. With the carrier in theater, negotiating positions harden, red lines gain credibility, and adversaries are confronted with the tangible cost of escalation. The inverse is equally sharp. For an adversary, an unannounced U.S. carrier appearance is not reassurance. It's a gun being placed on the table in the middle of the conversation. It forces a shift from strategic patience to immediate readiness. Commanders know the group's reach, hundreds of miles in every direction, layered defenses, and a sustained sortie rate that can overwhelm regional forces. The first reaction is usually intelligence-driven. Long-range surveillance aircraft, submarine patrols, and shore-based radar systems working overtime to track every movement. Electronic warfare units test emissions control and probe for weaknesses. Missile batteries are put on alert, dispersal orders ripple through forward bases, and naval units shadow the strike group's perimeter, waiting to test its responses. Their confident buildup, designed for a predictable landscape, was checkmated by a single piece on the board. For adversaries with regional ambitions, this sudden arrival disrupts timelines. Plans that assumed a gap in U.S. presence now face a platform capable of launching strikes without warning. Exercises begin to demonstrate defiance, missile launches into nearby waters, aggressive fighter intercepts, and naval maneuvers designed to test carrier defenses. But behind the posturing lies a recalculation. The U.S. can now enforce its will at sea and in the air, within hours. History offers concrete examples. In the Middle East, rapid deployments of carrier strike groups into the Persian Gulf have shifted the balance of ongoing crises in days. For Gulf Cooperation Council states, the sight of a carrier has calmed markets and given political leaders more freedom to push back on regional threats. For Iran, the same sightline has led to missile unit alerts, increased patrol boat swarms, and the mobilization of proxy forces. Not always to strike, but to signal that the cost of U.S. presence will be felt somewhere. In the Western Pacific, a sudden carrier appearance has repeatedly altered the tone of maritime disputes. When tensions spike in the South China Sea, the entry of a U.S. strike group triggers parallel timelines. Allies initiate more aggressive joint patrols, while China often responds with large-scale military drills. The carrier's arrival forces Beijing to divert resources to monitoring and countering the group, complicating other strategic initiatives. The carrier's utility in such moments is rooted in its dual identity, a warfighting platform and a geopolitical signal. It is a moving airbase that needs no host nation permission, capable of shifting hundreds of miles overnight. It is also a statement of intent, visible from satellite imagery to local fishing boats. This combination is why the sudden appearance of a strike group can rewrite regional calculations in hours. Allies read it as insurance. Adversaries read it as a deadline. There is also an unspoken element, the deterrence by uncertainty. Both friend and foe know that a carrier group's rules of engagement are flexible enough to allow for immediate defensive action, but controlled enough to avoid unplanned escalation. This ambiguity creates pressure. Adversaries must assume that any hostile move within the strike group's envelope risks a response before higher-level diplomacy can intervene. The public stage amplifies these effects. News images of a carrier's arrival are played differently across audiences. In allied states, they are used to reinforce trust and solidarity. In adversary nations, state media may present them as provocations or proof of foreign aggression, rallying nationalist sentiment. But even propaganda is an acknowledgement. The carrier's presence is significant enough to warrant a narrative. In strategic terms, the arrival often accelerates decisions that might otherwise drag. An ally debating a joint resolution or increased defense spending suddenly finds its path clearer. An adversary weighing whether to test contested waters might instead choose to delay, dispersing forces until the strike group departs. The physical presence of U.S. naval air power compresses political time and alters military pacing. Ultimately, the unexpected appearance of a U.S. carrier strike group operates as a high-stakes form of communication. Its audience is everyone, from national leadership down to local commanders at sea. Allies feel the shoulder-to-shoulder commitment. Adversaries feel the weight of a potential first strike capability operating just offshore. In both cases, the impact is immediate, measurable, and designed to shape outcomes before the first shot is fired. When the group departs, the space it leaves behind is not the same as before. The memory of how quickly the carrier arrived and what it brought with it lingers in strategic planning rooms on both sides. The sudden carrier on the horizon is never just steel and aircraft. It is a moving decision point, a shift in leverage, and a reminder that in modern power politics, the fastest way to change a conversation is to arrive, unannounced, with a floating city of war just offshore.